Hey everybody, this is Evangelism teaching video number 11. So in this video, what I want to talk about is, I want to talk about words of knowledge. Okay, so first of all, I want to explain what a word of knowledge is. Okay, so a word of knowledge is supernatural information that God gives concerning a person's current situation or something that has taken place in the past. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of a word of knowledge and how they pertain to evangelism. So I remember some years back, I was doing street ministry, and I approached this young guy, and I started to talk to him about the things of God, and he didn't want to hear anything about it, and he actually was pretty rude to me. And he started walking away, and as he was walking away, all of a sudden there were some things that began coming into my mind, and I just, without even having a chance to really think about it, I called out to the guy and I said, "I know some things about you." And he turns around and he starts walking back towards me, and he says, "Oh yeah, well, what do you know about me?" I said, "I know that you have an explosive anger issue." I said, you go through your life and you try to contain this anger. I said, and you try to hold it back and hold it back and hold it back. I said, but it almost feels like a volcano in you, where this pressure begins to build and then you blow. And I said, and this anger issue has destroyed a lot of your relationships. And I said, and as a matter of fact, I feel like God is saying that you're actually on the streets tonight because of your anger issue. Well, at that, he was blown away because I had totally read his mail. He asked me if I was a psychic. I said, nope, I'm not a psychic. I just know the one who knows everything about you. And it was, I ended up sharing the gospel with this kid, and he ended up giving his life to Christ. So that's just one example of a word of knowledge. So basically, a word of knowledge can come concerning somebody's situation in their lives, or a lot of times the Lord will give us a word of knowledge concerning a sickness that is that a person's dealing with, and many times when the Lord gives a word of knowledge for somebody for sickness, a lot of times the person will get healed of that sickness when we pray for them. So an instance of that was, I remember I was, another time I was doing street ministry, and I approached a group of kids, and they were all between the ages of, I don't know, probably 18 to 22, or so I began to, began talking to them, and I kept hearing the word scoliosis. Okay, like that thought kept popping into my head, the word scoliosis, scoliosis, scoliosis. And finally, I said, hey, do any of you guys deal with scoliosis? Do any of you have curvature of the spine? And they all looked at each other and, oh, no, not me, not me, not me. And so I was kind of feeling a little bit foolish, and, and that was, and whatever, what are you going to do? It happens. And, and the conversation really didn't go anywhere. And we ended up parting ways, and so then about an hour and a half later, we ran into this same group of kids, and this one kid from the group approached me, and he said, "I have a question for you." Okay, he pulled me to the side, and he said, "I have a question for you," and he said, "How did you know that I had scoliosis?" I said, "Do you have scoliosis?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Why didn't you say anything?" He said, "Because I was so freaked out." He said, "I was scared." And I said, I didn't know. I said, but again, I said, I know the God who knows everything about you. He knows everything about you, and he wants to heal you. And so I had this kid sit down on the bench, and I held him by his legs, and I commanded his leg to grow, and when his leg grew, his spine straightened out. He literally felt his spine straighten. Well, all of his friends witnessed this, and that night 3 out of those 5 kids were healed of scoliosis. There was 3 of them. Three of those kids out of that group actually had scoliosis, though they told me they didn't. And the result of that was all 5 of those kids gave their lives to Christ that night. And it was all because of a word of knowledge that opened their eyes to the reality of Christ. They were healed, the gospel was preached, and they were saved. So, how do we receive words of knowledge? How does God give us words of knowledge? Well, I'm gonna talk about a few of these ways. So, one of, like, as it pertains to me, when God gives me a word of knowledge, just like I said, I just had a thought, and the thought was scoliosis. Okay, the thought was scoliosis, and so I put it out there. And just like with the kid who had the anger issue, all of a sudden all I heard was anger. I just thought he's got anger, and so I said, "Hey, I know something about you." So sometimes we'll just get an impression of something. Okay, another way that we get words of knowledge is that we'll feel something in our body. Like, say you're standing there and all of a sudden you get a pain in your elbow that you don't usually have. Okay? And then there's people there and you say, "Hey, this might sound crazy, but does anybody here have pain in their elbow?" "Yeah, I have pain in my elbow. My elbow's been killing me lately." "Well, how about I pray for you?" So sometimes you'll actually feel what a person is dealing with. And when you put it out there, you'll find that, well, there's probably somebody there who's dealing with it. Now, if you always have pain in your elbow and you get a pain in your elbow, well, that's probably not a word of knowledge. Another way that we get words of knowledge is you may see a body part in your mind. Okay? You may see a body part. Like, all of a sudden you're looking at somebody and you see a foot. You ask them, "Hey, do you have any kind of issue with your foot?" "Oh yeah, I have plantar fasciitis." "Well, how about I pray for that?" So again, seeing the body part. Another way that you could possibly get a word of knowledge is by reading the word of knowledge. I had a friend who got a word of knowledge. We were in Honduras, and he saw the word verde, and he had no idea what the word verde meant. He had no idea that verde actually meant green. And so he stood up and he shared this word of knowledge. He said, "I feel like the Lord has given me one word, and that word is verde." Well, as it turns out, nobody stood up for it, and he was thinking, "Boy, I guess I missed that one." Well, during the ministry time, a young guy came up in a green shirt, and he told my friend, he said, "I have epilepsy, and I don't want anybody to know that I have epilepsy. And when you said the word verde," he said, "I knew that you were talking to me because I'm wearing this green shirt." Okay? Which we would have never thought, but God spoke that to him. That guy knew that word was for him. He was prayed for his epilepsy, and he was completely healed, never had another seizure again. Another way that we receive a word of knowledge is by when we're just speaking, all of a sudden a word will just come out of our mouths. I was preaching at a meeting in upstate New York, and I was sharing how me and a friend bring teams of people to Honduras. But instead of saying Honduras, I said, "Me and my friend bring teams of people to arthritis." And everybody started laughing, and I started laughing, and then I thought to myself, "Hey, wait a minute, that's a word of knowledge." And so I took that time I said, "If there's anybody here with arthritis, I want you to stand up, put your hand on the place where you have the arthritis." And I commanded arthritis out of their bodies, and out of 5 people were healed. Another way that we receive words of knowledge is we may dream a word of knowledge. We see somebody having a certain condition or going through a certain difficulty in their life, or something going on in their life, and and we dream this, and then we run into them, and then you say, hey, this might sound crazy, but do you have such and such going on? I mean, think about the impact that has on a person. Another way, and last, finally, you may see an open vision, where you see somebody and they're dealing with this issue, kind of like the dream thing. But that's how we receive words of knowledge. Now, there is a right way and a wrong way to present words of knowledge, because you know what? As we step out in this, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you're going to miss it. We all miss it, unfortunately, but practice makes perfect. I remember, I was doing street ministry with somebody, and we were ministering to a couple of girls, and this person that I was ministering with kept, wanted to say something. Hey, I feel like God's giving me a word of knowledge. God's giving me something. I'm like, okay, go ahead. And this person went on. She walked up to the person. She said, "You're a dancer. You love to dance. You feel free when you dance." And the girl, and she was just very matter-of-factly this is what's going on with you. This is what you're a dancer. And this girl that we were ministering to looked at her, and she's made a face I don't know what you're talking about. This is really weird. And subsequently, the conversation shut down. The way that we deliver a word of knowledge makes all the difference in the world. Now, had she gone up to this girl and said, hey, this might sound crazy, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to hear from God, and I just kind of felt like God was saying that you're a dancer, and she might have said, no, I'm not a dancer. And then, it never feels good. Anytime you miss it, it doesn't feel good. But she would have said, oh, okay, it just popped into my head, so I figured I'd ask. And the girl would have not thought anything of it. She would say, no, I'm not a dancer. And then the conversation would have continued. But when we deliver a word of knowledge in an arrogant kind of way, and we miss it, then we just look plain old weird. And it just doesn't look good, and a lot of times it shuts down the ministry. But when you deliver a word of knowledge in humility, a lot of times ministry will continue. But I'll tell you what, words of knowledge ranks right up there with a person getting prayed for and getting healed, or because what it does is it is the power of God. It's the reality of God revealed, so that when the reality of Christ is revealed, okay, all of a sudden people are all ears. You preach the gospel, they believe the gospel, and they end up getting saved as a result. So I just want to encourage you, step out, listen for the Lord. The Lord's speaking more than you think. But we need to be willing to take a step of faith and to deliver what we feel God is giving us to deliver. Okay, so I hope this helps. I hope this serves to equip you in the ministry of evangelism. So we'll see you next time on the next video. All right, God bless you guys.